The classroom at the Galactic Academy was nothing like the ones on Earth. It was a massive circular space with seats, arranged in rising levels around a central demonstration floor. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Students from dozens of different species sat in their designated sections. Their bodies adapted to different gravities, atmospheres, and environments through personal force fields. Tay-Min sat in the human section, which was small compared to most others. Only 5 humans attended this particular class on Introduction to Species Psychology. He adjusted his universal translator earpiece and watched as Professor Velther floated into the room. The professor was a Quellan, a species that looked like a massive jellyfish made of silver light. Tentacles drifted beneath his dome-shaped body, and his voice came through the translator as smooth and calm. "Students, today we begin your semester project," Professor Velther announced. His form pulsed with each word. "Each of you will present a game from your homeworld. But not just any game. It must be a game of risk. A game that involves real danger. A game that shows how your species thinks about death, chance, and survival." The classroom filled with excited chatter and nervous whispers. Tay-Min glanced around at his classmates. Next to the human section sat Hyun-Woo, a Velnari whose scales currently showed a cautious yellow color. The Velnari looked like tall lizards that walked on 2 legs, and their scales changed color with their emotions. Hyun-Woo had become something of a friend to Tay-Min over the past few months. Though the Velnari was always worried about safety regulations and proper procedures, further around the circle sat G1, a creche female whose species resembled upright mantises with multiple sensory stalks where a head should be. The creche were known throughout the galaxy as master analysts and strategists. G1's stalks were always moving, always observing, always calculating. She had corrected 3 professors already this semester when their math was wrong. On the opposite side of the room was Sang-Ho, a Thulkar warrior. The Thulkar looked like bipedal bears covered in thick armor plating that grew naturally from their skin. They were one of the few species in the galaxy that still valued combat and warfare as honorable pursuits. Sang-Ho had challenged Tay-Min to a sparring match in the first week of classes. The fight had ended in a draw, which apparently earned Tay-Min some measure of respect from the warrior species. "The games must follow 3 rules," Professor Velther continued. "First, they must involve genuine stakes. No simulations. No safety nets that completely eliminate risk. Second, they must be traditional to your culture, something that reveals a truth about your species. Third, you must be able to explain what this game says about how your people think about mortality." A student from the plenary section raised a crystalline appendage. The plenary were living crystals who communicated through light pulses. "Professor, how much risk is acceptable?" "My species has games where one might suffer minor fractures. The level of risk is up to you," the professor replied. "I am not asking you to die for a grade. I am asking you to show us something real about your species. Something that cannot be understood through textbooks alone." Tay-Min leaned back in his seat, his mind already working through possibilities. What game represented humanity? What game showed the galaxy who humans really were? His first thoughts went to extreme sports, dangerous stunts, or combat competitions. But those existed in other species too. Humans did not have a monopoly on physical challenges. He needed something unique. Something that would make the other species understand what made humans different. What made them terrifying and fascinating in equal measure to the rest of the galactic community over the next few weeks. Students began their presentations. Hyun-Woo showed a Velnari game called The Depth Run, where players navigated increasingly dangerous cave systems for prizes. However, the caves had multiple safety stations, emergency teleport beacons, and rescue teams on standby. The actual death rate was nearly 0. It demonstrated the Velnari philosophy: take calculated risks with proper safety measures. G1 presented a creche strategy game that involved betting resources on predictive models of chaotic systems. Players could lose everything, but it was lost through miscalculation, not random chance. It showed how the Kresh believed in the power of intelligence and analysis to overcome uncertainty. Sangho brought weapons to class for a Thulkar Honor duel demonstration. Two warriors fought with real blades until one yielded or was injured enough to be unable to continue. It was violent and bloody, but it followed strict rules. Death was possible but rare, and only happened in the context of honorable combat. It revealed the Thulkar belief that risk should serve honor and glory. Each presentation followed a similar pattern. Games with danger, yes, but danger that served a purpose. Danger with rules and structure. Danger that could be managed, calculated, or overcome with skill and preparation. Every species in the galaxy seemed to have the same basic philosophy. Risk should be minimized whenever possible. And when it cannot be minimized, it should at least be understood and controlled. Tae-Min watched and listened. He took notes. He saw the pattern clearly, and he knew exactly what he needed to present to show the difference between humanity and everyone else in that classroom on the day before his presentation. Dalsu, another human student, approached him in the cafeteria. Dalsu was older, a graduate student studying xenobiology. He had overheard Taemin talking about his project idea. "Are you really going to do it?" Dalsu asked quietly. "Yes," Taemin replied. "They won't understand. They'll think you're insane. That's exactly the point." Dalsu nodded slowly. "Need any help setting it up?" "No, but thank you for offering." That night, Taemin sat alone in his quarters, staring at the object on his desk. It was a simple revolver, a weapon so primitive that most species thought humans still used it only for historical demonstrations. He had requested it from the Academy's Museum of Technological Development, claiming he needed it for his presentation on human history. The request had been approved without question. He picked up the gun, felt its weight in his hand. Tomorrow, he would show his classmates something they would never forget. Tomorrow, he would teach the galaxy a lesson about what it meant to be human. Tomorrow, they would understand why humans were both respected and feared across countless worlds. Tomorrow, he would play Russian roulette. The demonstration floor felt larger than usual as Taemin walked to its center. Every student in the circular classroom was watching him. Some leaned forward with curiosity. Others whispered to their neighbors through their translators. Professor Velther floated above the floor. His silver form pulsing with what might have been anticipation, Taemin carried only two items. In his right hand was the revolver, its metal surface reflecting the blue glow of the classroom walls. In his left hand was a small box containing 6 cartridges. He set the box down on the floor and held up the gun for everyone to see. "This is a revolver," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "It is a primitive kinetic weapon from Earth. It fires a small metal projectile at high speed. The projectile causes massive trauma to whatever it hits. If fired at a human head from close range, death is almost certain." Han Wu's scales shifted to a worried blue color. The Velnari leaned toward the student next to him and whispered something. Several other students exchanged glances. Weapons were not uncommon in presentations, especially after Sangho's honor duel demonstration. But there was something about the way Taemin spoke that made the atmosphere in the room feel different. G1 sensory stalks were all pointed directly at Taemin. The Kresh female had probably already calculated a dozen different scenarios for where this presentation was going. Her species was good at that, but Taemin suspected that even G1 would not predict what came next. "The game I am presenting today is called Russian roulette," Taemin continued. "It originated on Earth approximately 200 years ago, though its exact origins are debated. The name comes from Russia, a region on Earth where the game may have first been played, though this is not confirmed." He held up one of the cartridges from the box. "This is a bullet. It contains a small explosive charge and a metal projectile. When the trigger of the gun is pulled, the firing mechanism strikes the bullet, causing an explosion that propels the projectile out of the barrel at lethal speed." Taemin opened the cylinder of the revolver. It swung out from the side of the gun, revealing 6 empty chambers. The revolver has 6 chambers arranged in a rotating cylinder. Each chamber can hold 1 bullet. For Russian roulette, only 1 bullet is loaded. He took the cartridge and slid it into one of the chambers. The metallic click echoed in the silent classroom. Then he snapped the cylinder shut and gave it a hard spin. The cylinder rotated rapidly with a whirring sound before slowly coming to a stop. After the cylinder is spun, the position of the bullet is unknown, Taemin explained. The player then places the gun against their own head and pulls the trigger. If the chamber that aligns with the barrel is empty, nothing happens. If the chamber contains the bullet, the gun fires and the player dies. The classroom remained absolutely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the usual background hum of the force field generator seemed quieter than before. Finally, Hyun-woo's translator crackled to life. "That is not a game. That is suicide." "It is both," Taemin replied. "The odds are 5 and 6 that the chamber is empty. The player has an approximately 83% chance of survival, but there is a 1 in 6 chance of death. Pure random chance. No skill involved. No way to calculate or predict the outcome. Why?" The question came from a Drellian student whose species resembled 4-armed bears. "Why would anyone play this? What is the purpose? What is the prize?" "There is no prize," Taemin said. "That is the point. The game exists only to test fate itself, to prove that you are willing to risk everything for nothing, to demonstrate that you do not fear death." Professor Velther-S form pulsed rapidly, a sign of agitation in Quellan species. "Student Taemin, I must interrupt. You said this game originated 200 years ago. Surely it is now illegal. Surely your species has outlawed such a practice?" "It is illegal in most jurisdictions," Taemin confirmed. "But variations of it are still played. Some humans play it with monetary stakes. Others play it as a test of courage. Some play it simply because they can." "This is insanity," Sang-ho's deep voice rumbled across the classroom. The Thulkar warrior stood up, his armor plating scraping against itself. "My species values honorable death in combat. We accept risk in battle, but this has no honor. This has no purpose. This is not courage. This is stupidity." Taemin had expected this reaction. He had prepared for it. To your species, yes, it appears stupid. But you must understand what this game represents. Every other species in this room has presented games where risk serves a purpose. Risk for resources, risk for honor, risk for glory, even risk for entertainment, but entertainment with safety measures. He held up the revolver again. Russian roulette is different. It is risk for the sake of risk alone. It is humanity looking at death and saying, maybe today, maybe not. Let's find out. It is the purest expression of something unique to humans, which is? Gyuwon's synthesized voice asked. "The complete inability to recognize when something is too dangerous to try," Taemin answered. "Other species evolved to fear death appropriately. Humans evolved to chase it, challenge it, and laugh at it. We do not just tolerate risk, we seek it out. We create it when it does not exist naturally. Russian roulette is humanity distilled into a single action." The classroom erupted into discussion. Students argued in dozens of languages, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Some species appeared horrified. Others seemed fascinated. A few looked skeptical, as if they thought Taemin was exaggerating or lying. Professor Velther raised several tentacles for silence. "Student Taemin, this is a fascinating cultural analysis. However, I have concerns about the historical accuracy. Surely no species could develop space travel, quantum technology, and join the galactic community while maintaining such a reckless attitude toward mortality?" Before Taemin could answer, another voice spoke up from the human section. "He's not exaggerating." All eyes turned to Dalsu, who stood up slowly. The older human looked around the classroom, meeting the stares of dozens of alien species. "Everything Taemin said is true," Dalsu continued. "I have played Russian roulette twice. Both times I survived. I know 4 other humans who have played it. 3 of them are still alive." The classroom exploded into chaos. Professor Velther-S form flashed bright white, the Quellan equivalent of shouting for attention. The classroom gradually fell silent, though the tension remained thick in the air. Students who had been arguing turned their attention back to the demonstration floor where Taemin still stood, the revolver held loosely in his hand. "Student Dalsu, please sit down," the professor said firmly. "We will discuss your confession after class. Student Taemin, continue your presentation, but I expect you to explain the psychology behind this game, not simply shock us with its existence." Taemin nodded. He had anticipated this moment. The shock value was necessary to grab their attention, but now came the real lesson. Now he had to make them understand. "Let me explain how humans are different," Taemin began. "Every species in this room evolved on a world suited to their biology. The Velnari evolved in safe cave systems with stable temperatures and few predators. The Kresh evolved on a world where intelligence and planning led to survival. The Thulkar evolved as apex predators with natural armor and strength." He paused, making eye contact with students around the room. "Humans evolved on what the galactic community classifies as a Class 12 death world. For those unfamiliar with the classification system, that means a planet where almost everything can kill you. Earth has extreme temperature variations, violent weather systems, deadly predators, poisonous plants, dangerous diseases, and natural disasters that strike without warning." Good One stalks waves slightly. "Many species evolved on challenging worlds. This does not explain the psychological need for random death games." "You are correct," Taemin agreed. "But here is what makes humans unique. We did not evolve to be the fastest or the strongest. We evolved to be persistence hunters. We chased prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. We survived not through superior physical abilities, but through sheer, stubborn refusal to give up." He began walking slowly around the demonstration floor as he spoke. "This created something unusual in human psychology. We developed an extremely high tolerance for risk and discomfort. More than that, we developed a need to test ourselves constantly, to push boundaries, to see how far we could go before breaking." Sang-Ho crossed his massive arms. "This is just warrior mentality. My species has this also. We test ourselves in combat." "But your combat has rules," Taemin countered. "Purpose, structure. You fight for honor and glory. Humans do dangerous things for no reason at all. We climb mountains because they are there. We jump out of aircraft for fun. We race vehicles at lethal speeds. We explore places that might kill us simply to say we explored them. These are still calculated risks," Hien-Wu interjected, his scales now a confused purple color. "Climbing mountains requires skill. Racing requires skill. These activities have purpose, even if that purpose is personal satisfaction or exploration." "True," Taemin said. "But then we created Russian roulette. And that is where we crossed the line from calculated risk into something else entirely. Something no other species seems to share." He held up the revolver again. "This game has no skill component. No training can help you. No intelligence can predict the outcome. It is pure chance, 1 in 6 odds that you die. And humans play it anyway. Not for money, though some do. Not for honor, though some claim it. We play it because we can. Because death is always one mistake away anyway, so why not face it directly and see what happens?" A student from the Milivan section spoke up. The Milivans were small, rabbit-like creatures known for their nervous dispositions. But this is irrational. Survival instinct should prevent any species from playing such a game. How did humans survive long enough to reach space if they actively seek death? "Because most of us do not play Russian roulette," Taemin explained. "But enough of us do that it remains a known game. Enough of us seek extreme risk that it is considered a normal part of human culture. Every human knows someone who has done something incredibly dangerous for no good reason. We have entire industries built around dangerous recreational activities." One stalks tilted in thought. "I have studied human statistics for another class. Human casualties from recreational activities are extraordinarily high compared to other species. I assume this was an error in the data." "It is not an error," Taemin confirmed. "Humans die every year from activities we do for fun. Extreme sports, dangerous hobbies, risky behaviors. And we keep doing them. We know the risks. We accept them. Sometimes we even increase them deliberately. This is madness, Haiyan Wu said quietly. How can an entire species function like this? How do you build civilizations if everyone is trying to kill themselves? That is the fascinating part, Taemin replied. The same psychology that makes us play Russian roulette also makes us the best explorers in the galaxy. The same refusal to accept danger as a reason to stop makes us push boundaries in science, technology, and discovery. Humans were the first species to attempt quantum jumping without fully understanding the risks. We colonized hostile planets that other species deemed uninhabitable. We volunteered for military operations that had almost no chance of success. He looked around the room, meeting as many eyes and visual sensors as possible. The galaxy fears humans not because we are strong. Many species are stronger. Not because we are smart. Many species are smarter. The galaxy fears humans because we do not know when to stop. We see danger and we walk toward it. We see impossible odds and we try anyway. Russian roulette is just the purest expression of this trait. Professor Velther drifted lower, his tentacles curling in what might have been concern or contemplation. Student Taemin, you make a compelling argument about human psychology. But I must ask, do you personally believe this trait is beneficial or detrimental to your species? Taemin considered the question carefully. Both, it has gotten many humans killed unnecessarily. But it has also pushed humanity forward faster than we might have progressed otherwise. We reach for the stars because we do not know enough to be properly afraid of them. And sometimes, that reckless courage makes all the difference. Sang-ho uncrossed his arms and leaned forward. You speak of human courage and risk-taking as if it is unique, but you have not proven your point. You have only explained it. Words are easy. Any species can claim bravery. The challenge hung in the air. Taemin felt the weight of it. He looked at the revolver in his hand, then at the faces and sensors and stalks pointed in his direction. He had known this moment would come. He had prepared for it. But now, standing here, he had to decide if he would truly go through with it. You are right, Taemin said slowly. Words are not enough. To truly understand what Russian roulette means to human psychology, you need to see it played. The classroom went completely silent. The silence in the classroom was absolute. Even the constant hum of the force field generators seemed to fade into nothingness. Every being in the room stared at Taemin, processing what he had just implied. Haiyan Wu was the first to react. His scales flashed through rapid color changes, yellow to blue to white, settling finally on a deep red that indicated alarm. No, absolutely not. This is an academic institution. There are safety regulations. You cannot seriously be suggesting what I think you are suggesting. I am not suggesting anything, Taemin said calmly. I am stating a fact. To understand Russian roulette, you must see it played. That is the only way to comprehend what it represents about human psychology. Professor Velther's form pulsed rapidly, his tentacles writhing in agitation. Student Taemin, I must intervene. Academy regulations strictly prohibit any activity that presents a significant risk of death to students. Your presentation has been educational, but it ends here. You will not demonstrate this game. That is final. But you required genuine stakes, Taemin pointed out. You said no simulations, no safety nets that completely eliminate risk. Every other student has presented games with real danger. Why should human culture be exempt from demonstration? Because the other games had survival rates above 95%, Jawan's synthesized voice cut in. Her stalks were calculating, processing probabilities. Sang-ho's honor duel had a death rate of approximately 2%. Hanwoo's cave run had a death rate of less than 1%. You are proposing a game with a 16.67% death rate. That is an order of magnitude more dangerous. Precisely, Taemin said. Which proves my point. Other species create dangerous games but add safety measures to keep the risk manageable. Humans created a game where the entire point is unmanageable risk, where 1 in 6 is considered acceptable odds. A Drelian student spoke up, his forearms gesturing in confusion. But you are an individual, not your entire species. Surely you do not share this collective insanity? Surely you recognize that playing this game would be foolish? I do recognize it would be foolish, Taemin agreed. But humans do foolish things. That is what I've been trying to explain. We know it is foolish. We do it anyway. Sang-ho stood up again, his armor plating scraping loudly. The Thulkar warrior walked to the edge of his section, as close as he could get to the demonstration floor without leaving his designated area. You are using logic to justify illogic. If you know it is foolish, why do it? You are not proving courage. You are proving stupidity. There is no honor in random death. You keep mentioning honor, Taemin said. Your species values honor. Humans value something different. We value the freedom to choose our own risks, even when those risks make no sense. We value the right to look at death and say, not today, or maybe today as we choose. Russian roulette represents absolute freedom from fear. It represents absolute freedom from sense, Hyun-woo countered, his scales still deep red. Please, Taemin, do not do this. You have made your point. We understand that humans are reckless. You do not need to prove it by dying in front of us. Dalsu spoke again from the human section. He is not going to die. You cannot possibly know that, Ji-won said, her stalks all pointing at the older human. The odds are random. Probability does not care about confidence. I know human psychology, Dalsu replied. Taemin has already decided to demonstrate. Nothing any of you say will change his mind. This is what humans do. We make decisions that seem insane to others, and then we follow through with absolute commitment. This is madness, a Millivan student squeaked. Professor, you must stop this. Security must be called. He has a weapon. He is threatening his own life. Professor Velther-S' form flashed bright red, the Quellan signal for emergency and danger. I am calling security now. Student Taemin, you will put down the weapon immediately. This presentation is terminated. You will face disciplinary action for bringing a loaded firearm to class without proper authorization. The authorization was for a historical weapon demonstration, Taemin said, which is what I am providing. Historical demonstrations do not involve loaded weapons pointed at students, the professor snapped. I am not pointing it at any student, Taemin said calmly. I am pointing it at myself. The door to the classroom opened and 3 security officers rushed in. They were a mix of species, all wearing the blue uniforms of Academy security. The lead officer, a tall insectoid, spoke into his communicator. Medical team to Lecture Hall 7. Possible psychological emergency. Taemin looked at the security officers, then at Professor Velther, then around the classroom at his fellow students. He saw fear in most faces, confusion in some. But in Sang-ho's eyes he saw something else, challenge. The Thulkar warrior was still watching him, waiting to see if the human would back down. In that moment, Taemin made his decision. He had come this far. He had explained the psychology. He had defended the logic of illogic. But words alone would never make them understand. The security officers were approaching the demonstration floor. In seconds they would reach him, take the weapon, and escort him out. His presentation would end with failure. Humanity would be seen as all talk, no action. He thought about his species, about every human who had climbed a mountain despite the danger, about every pilot who had tested an experimental craft, about every soldier who had volunteered for a suicide mission, about every explorer who had gone into the unknown knowing they might not return. Russians playing games in snowy prisons. American teenagers daring each other at parties. Soldiers in foxholes testing fate. Humans throughout history facing death and refusing to blink. I am sorry, Professor, Taemin said. But you told us to show you something real about our species. Something that textbooks cannot teach? The security officers were 10 meters away. 8 meters. 6 meters. Tae-min raised the revolver. The cylinder had been spun. 1 chamber held a bullet. 5 chambers were empty. 5 chances to live. 1 chance to die. Pure random chance. No skill, no calculation, No prayer to any god. Just a human and probability staring at each other across the barrel of a gun. This is what it means to be human, Taemin said. He placed the barrel against his right temple. Hyun-woo screamed. Multiple students lunged forward, but force fields kept them in their sections. Professor Valther's form went completely white. Gwon's stalks all pointed directly at Taemin, watching, calculating. Unable to look away, the security officers broke into a run. Taemin's finger tightened on the trigger. He pulled it. Click. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. The sound echoed through the classroom like thunder. The security officers froze in place. Every student stared in absolute shock. No one moved. No one breathed. For 3 full seconds, the classroom might as well have been frozen in time. Then Hyun-woo collapsed. His scales went pure white and he fell sideways, unconscious before he hit his seat. The Millivan student made a high-pitched sound and fainted as well. Several other students looked like they might follow. The security officers reached Taemin and grabbed him, one on each arm. The third officer carefully took the revolver from his hand. The lead officer spoke into his communicator. Medical team required urgently. Multiple students in shock. One student has committed an act of severe recklessness with a firearm. Request immediate psychological evaluation. Taemin did not resist. He let the officers hold his arms. He looked up at Professor Valther, whose form was still pure white. Then he looked at Sang-ho. The Thulkar warrior was standing motionless, staring at Taemin with an expression that might have been respect or terror or some combination of both. Presentation complete? Taemin said quietly. The medical team arrived within minutes. They rushed Hyun-woo and the Millivan student out on floating gurneys, both still unconscious from shock. 3 other students requested medical attention for stress reactions. Ji-won remained in her seat, all her stalks still pointed at where Taemin had stood. As if replaying the moment over and over in her analytical mind, security escorted Taemin from the classroom in restraints. Standard procedure, they explained, for any student who posed a danger to themselves or others. He did not argue. He walked calmly between the officers, down the curved hallways of the academy, past other students who stared and whispered. News traveled fast in an interconnected galactic university. By the time they reached the security office, half the campus probably knew what had happened. They placed him in a holding room and took the restraints off. The room was small and empty except for a bench and a water dispenser. The walls were the same soft blue as the classroom. An hour passed. Then 2, then 3. Taemin sat on the bench and waited. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. Finally, the door opened and a medical officer entered. She was a Quellan like Professor Valther, but smaller, with tentacles that moved in precise, professional patterns. "I am Dr. Myra," she said through his translator. "I need to evaluate your mental state." The evaluation took an hour. Standard questions about suicidal ideation, risk assessment, judgment, and impulse control. Taemin answered honestly. No, he was not suicidal. Yes, he understood the risk he had taken. Yes, he had planned it in advance. No, he did not regret it. Yes, he would do it again if necessary to make his point. Dr. Myra's form pulsed thoughtfully. You are psychologically stable by human standards. However, by galactic standards, your behavior indicates severe risk-seeking tendencies that are considered pathological. I am recommending mandatory counseling sessions. I understand, Taemin said. I'm also noting in my report that this may be a species-wide psychological trait rather than an individual disorder. If that is the case, the Academy may need to revise its understanding of human mental health baselines. After the medical evaluation came the disciplinary meeting. Director Yulrin, a massive crystalline being who administered the entire Academy, sat across from Taemin in a formal hearing room. Professor Valther attended as a witness. Security officers lined the walls. Student Taemin, Director Yulrin's voice rumbled through the translator like grinding stones. You have violated 17 separate Academy regulations. Bringing a loaded firearm to class. Reckless endangerment of yourself. Creating a psychological hazard for other students. The list continues. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Yes, Temin said. The assignment was to present a game that showed something real about our species. Something that textbooks could not teach. I did exactly that. Every other species presented games with manageable risk. I presented a game that shows how humans think about unmanageable risk. The only way to truly demonstrate this was to play it. You could have killed yourself, Professor Velther said, his form still slightly pale. In my 3 centuries of teaching, I have never seen such recklessness. That is my point, Taemin replied. You have never seen it because no other species would do it. Only humans. That is what makes us different. That is what I was trying to teach. Director Yulrin's crystalline body refracted light in sharp angles. Your point is noted. However, teaching methods that involve potential death are not acceptable. You are suspended from classes for 1 semester. You will attend mandatory counseling. You will write a formal apology to every student who was present in that classroom. And you are banned from possessing any weapons on campus for the remainder of your academic career. I accept these terms, Taemin said. However, the director continued, your presentation has created an unexpected situation. In the 3 days since the incident, 74 xenopsychology researchers have contacted the Academy requesting permission to interview you. 16 military organizations want to understand human risk assessment for strategic purposes. 9 medical institutions want to study human psychological baselines. And 41 news organizations want to cover the story. Taemin blinked in surprise. 3 days? How long have I been in holding? 72 hours, Professor Velther said. The incident required extensive documentation and investigation. Your classmate Han Wu regained consciousness after 18 hours but required additional treatment for psychological trauma. He has requested a transfer to a different class. I am sorry he was hurt, Taemin said quietly. Are you? Director Yulrin asked. Because your psychological evaluation suggests you believe the educational value outweighed the risk of traumatizing observers. Taemin considered this carefully. I am sorry individuals were hurt, but I am not sorry I did it. Both things can be true. A very human answer, the director observed. Which brings us to the next issue. Your presentation has become the most discussed academic event in Academy history. The video has been viewed over 500 million times across the galactic network. It has sparked debates in psychology departments on 200 worlds. The human government has contacted us 3 times asking for clarification. Student Taemin, you have single-handedly changed how the galaxy views humanity, for better or worse? Taemin asked. Both, Professor Velther admitted. Some species are now terrified of humans. Others are fascinated. Several military academies are studying the recording to understand human psychology in combat situations. 3 psychology textbooks are being revised to include sections on human risk-seeking behavior. You wanted to teach the galaxy something real about your species. You succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. The meeting ended with Taemin being released to his quarters under observation. He was not allowed to leave the human dormitory section without escort. Classes were suspended for him, but the mandatory counseling sessions began immediately. 3 times per week, he sat with Dr. Myra and discussed human psychology, risk assessment, and the cultural context of Russian roulette on the 5th day after his release. Taemin received a visitor. Professor Velther floated into the common room where Taemin was reading. The professor's form was its usual silver color, calm and contemplative. May I speak with you privately? The professor asked. They moved to a small meeting room. Professor Velther settled his form into a comfortable hovering position. For a long moment he said nothing, simply observing Taemin with whatever senses Quellens used for perception. I have been teaching for 314 years, the professor finally said. I have taught thousands of students from hundreds of species. I believed I understood the major differences between how species think about mortality and risk. Your presentation proved me wrong. I did not mean to be disrespectful, Taemin said. You were not disrespectful. You were educational. Painfully, traumatically, but genuinely educational. The professor's form pulsed slowly. I have spent the past several days reviewing human history, human military records, human exploration records, human casualty statistics, and I have come to a realization that troubles me deeply. What realization? That I have been teaching species psychology for 3 centuries without truly understanding what makes humans unique. I knew humans were bold. I knew they took risks. But I did not understand the fundamental difference in how you perceive mortality. Other species see death as something to avoid. Humans see death as something to challenge. The professor drifted closer. Do you know why humans are so effective as explorers? Why human soldiers have such high success rates in impossible missions? Why humans keep pushing boundaries that other species consider closed? I always attributed it to human stubbornness or human aggression. But it is neither. It is because humans genuinely do not know when the odds are too dangerous to try. Is that a compliment or a criticism? Taemin asked. Both, Professor Velther said. Just as you are both sorry and not sorry for what you did. Humans contain multitudes of contradictions. You are brilliant and reckless, compassionate and violent, cautious and suicidal. You can calculate exact probabilities and then ignore them completely. You are, from a galactic perspective, psychologically fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Taemin nodded slowly. That is what I was trying to demonstrate. You succeeded. But I need you to understand something. The professor's form pulsed with intensity. The galaxy is not ready for a species like humanity. We have hundreds of races that calculate risk carefully. We have species that fight when necessary. We have explorers who push boundaries within reason. But we do not have anyone else who plays Russian roulette. No one else who looks at 1 in 6 odds of death and pulls the trigger just to prove a point. Should we change? Taemin asked. I do not know, Professor Velther admitted. If you change, you might lose whatever makes humans so effective at impossible tasks. But if you do not change, you will continue to traumatize every other species you encounter with your incomprehensible approach to mortality. There is no easy answer. A week later, Dalsu visited Taemin in his quarters. The older human brought food from the human cafeteria. Real food from Earth rather than the synthesized nutrition that most species consumed.